Senator Hirono.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This hearing is happening when millions of people in this country, as well as around the world, are suffering through record-breaking heat following up on the hottest June ever recorded. And literally, when you see people being injured just by stepping on sidewalks, et cetera, where you see the enormity of the concerns. So we are on a path towards even more intense heat, wildfires, and extreme weather unless we reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by shifting to solar power and other lower-cost, zero-carbon sources. Democrats in Congress passed the Inflation Reduction Act to help speed the transition to clean energy. And we need to build new clean sources of energy in a fair manner and at a pace that reflects the severity of the global warming we are facing. So I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this panel or this hearing. For Mr. Tepley, your testimony states your company, quote, is a strong believer in NEPA and the environmental impact statement process. We use the EIS process to engage with affected communities and understand their needs. And in our experience, the EIS process helps us identify modifications we can make to pipeline projects that will avoid or mitigate adverse impacts on the environment. My question to you, do you think Congress should consider federal grants to state, tribal, and local agencies and to community-based organizations to increase their capacity for completing state, tribal, and local environmental reviews?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. As Williams, we are very much so focused on stakeholder engagement throughout our project development processes, including engaging our environmental justice community, our tribes, in areas that we operate in and have infrastructure that affects those folks. We spend a lot of time through the early project development, engaging, identifying potential workarounds, including reciting where important or where possible and practical. So we do think that the engagement at the stakeholder level is extremely important, and we think that we are doing a good job of.
Well, actually, the question was whether you think that these stakeholders should increase their capacity to engage in the process, because these are complicated issues. And in fact, Senator Copper proposed such a grant program to enable these stakeholders to better engage in the process. I think that's probably a good idea.
Yes, I think, as an example, we've engaged with the FERC Office of Public Participation, which is very similar to what you're describing. Very early on as that department was stood up with a keen interest in having a seat at the table with them as that process plays through FERC.
And providing some funding for them could even maybe shorten the entire process of review. For Mr. Smythe, in Hawaii, we have smaller capacity transmission lines compared to your company's lines. How much benefit to the capacity and reliability of the grid can come from upgrading the lines in existing transmission pathways?
Yes, thank you for your question. I think that you can see benefits when you upsize transmission lines, but you want to right-size transmission lines as well. So it really depends upon the use case, but generally speaking, as more demand, as demand increases and supply changes, upsizing the capacity of transmission lines can drive good outcomes for customers.
And then to change the transmission lines, we're talking about a pretty expensive proposition. So do electric companies, utility companies have the right incentives to invest in upgrading existing lines compared to building new lines?
Yes, we believe they do.
You think that they currently have those kinds of incentives?
Yes, I do believe the incentives are there. I do believe that we need to modify the planning processes. We need to modify cost allocation, and we need to do things that make it easier to move through the processes.
So speaking of cost allocations, can you elaborate on how you think regulators should measure and determine the public benefit of new transmission lines, and how that going to new transmission lines expenditure should be allocated to the ratepayers as opposed to the utilities?
Yes, we believe that beneficiaries and payers should be aligned. We think that benefits should be calculated in a broad manner that include all reasonable reliability and economic benefits, and the cost should be distributed accordingly.
That may be easier said than done because Hawaii, for example, I think it still pays the highest rates in the country for electricity. So anytime there's a potential for increasing those costs, there are going to be concerns raised.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.